Aarohi Malhotra, Victor Hale, Ryan Cross, three names that should never have crossed paths, one a teenage student chasing a dream, the other two shadows hiding behind wealth, power, and lies. What began as silent online support turned into a deadly web of control, money, and disappearance, ending with a body found far from the city that promised opportunity. Please subscribe for daily new update of crime story and watch till end. Aarohi Malhotra was 19 years old when she stepped onto American soil for the first time. She came from a quiet city in India where her life had been simple and protected. Her parents had spent years saving money so she could study in New York, believing education was the safest path to success. To them, Aarohi was a disciplined student with strong values and a clear future. They trusted her completely and believed the distance would only make her stronger. For Aarohi, the journey felt like freedom mixed with fear, excitement mixed with pressure. New York was nothing like she imagined. The city was louder, faster, and far more expensive than she expected. Tall buildings surrounded her small student apartment, and strangers filled the streets at all hours. During the day, she attended classes and tried to focus on her studies. At night, she sat alone in her room, scrolling through her phone, missing home. The time difference made conversations with her family short and rare. Slowly, the loneliness began to sink in, even though she never admitted it to anyone. Money became a constant worry. Her scholarship covered tuition, but rent, food, books, and transportation drained her savings quickly. She avoided telling her parents the truth because she knew they were already struggling. Aarohi started taking small part-time jobs, but the income was never enough. Each unpaid bill added to her stress. She felt embarrassed when she compared her life to other students who seemed confident and comfortable. The pressure to survive quietly pushed her toward decisions she never thought she would make. On social media, Aarohi created a different version of her life. She posted photos near famous landmarks and shared smiling pictures from cafes. Friends back home believed she was living a perfect dream. Every post was carefully planned to hide the truth. Behind the camera, she was exhausted and anxious. The city that promised opportunity slowly began to feel like a trap, yet she convinced herself that hardship was normal and temporary. As weeks passed, Aarohi started exploring online spaces that promised quick solutions. She read stories of students who received support from wealthy individuals in exchange for companionship. At first, she felt uncomfortable even thinking about it, but desperation has a way of changing limits. She told herself it would only be temporary, just until she found stability. The idea felt risky, but so did everything else in her life at that moment. Deep inside, Aarohi believed she was smart enough to control the situation. She had grown up cautious and responsible. She thought she could manage boundaries and stay safe. What she did not realize was that vulnerability attracts the wrong kind of attention. In a city full of opportunities, there were also people waiting to exploit those who felt lost. Aarohi stood at the edge of a decision that would quietly shape her fate, unaware that her dream of independence had already begun turning into something far darker. Late at night, when the city outside her window refused to sleep, Aarohi found herself scrolling endlessly through her phone. The silence of her small apartment felt heavier after midnight, and online spaces became her escape. She joined private forums and discreet platforms that promised financial help, mentorship, and companionship. These websites presented themselves as safe and exclusive, designed for young adults seeking support. The profiles were polished, filled with images of luxury, confidence, and success. Aarohi observed quietly at first, telling herself she was only curious. After days of hesitation, she created a profile using carefully chosen photos and limited personal details. She avoided revealing her full name, university, or address. Everything felt calculated. She believed caution would protect her. Messages began to arrive quickly, many of them uncomfortable or aggressive, which only increased her fear. Just when she considered deleting the account, one profile appeared different from the rest. The man seemed older, calm, and respectful. His online presence suggested wealth without excess and experience without arrogance. Their conversations remained strictly online in the beginning. Aarohi felt relieved by the distance. The man offered advice about managing life in America, shared stories of business success, and spoke about supporting ambitious students. Slowly, trust began to form. He never pressured her and allowed her to set limits. To Aarohi, this felt like safety. She believed she was in control, unaware that trust built in the dark often carries hidden risks. The man soon offered financial help, explaining it as encouragement rather than obligation. Small transfers appeared in her account, enough to cover groceries and rent. Aarohi felt a wave of relief she had not experienced in months. For the first time since arriving in New York, she could breathe. She convinced herself that this arrangement was harmless. She told no one, keeping the secret locked inside her. The money solved problems, but it also created a silent dependency. As weeks passed, the support increased. Aarohi upgraded her lifestyle slightly, buying better clothes and eating proper meals. Her stress began to fade, replaced by comfort and gratitude. She believed she had found a rare opportunity, something meant only for her. At the same time, she started spending more hours online, responding promptly, adjusting her schedule around messages. Without realizing it, her routines slowly began to change. What Aarohi failed to notice was how much information she was sharing. Casual details about her classes, daily movements, and emotional struggles slipped into conversations. The man remembered everything. He began referencing moments she barely recalled mentioning. His awareness felt flattering at first, like someone finally paying attention. Over time, it became unsettling, though she struggled to explain why. The secrecy around this connection grew heavier. Aarohi avoided questions from friends and kept her phone locked at all times. She felt torn between relief and unease. A part of her knew she was stepping into something she did not fully understand. Yet fear of losing financial support kept her moving forward. What started as a solution to survival was quietly transforming into a hidden world she could not easily escape, pulling her deeper with every message and every transfer. The changes in Aarohi's life became noticeable even to those who barely knew her. She no longer worried about counting every dollar before buying food or skipping meals to save money. Her wardrobe slowly filled with expensive clothes that she could never have afforded before. Weekend plans replaced lonely nights, and her social media began to reflect a life that looked confident and stable. To outsiders, it seemed like she had adjusted quickly to life in New York and found success on her own. Behind the scenes, her routine revolved around careful planning. Every outing, purchase, and trip was connected to the support she received. The financial help came regularly now, larger and more frequent than before. Aarohi told herself this was temporary, that she would soon stand on her own feet. Yet the comfort made it harder to imagine life without that support. Dependence crept in quietly, without warning. The man's influence over her life increased in subtle ways. Meetings were arranged in exclusive locations far from her campus. The places were chosen carefully, always private and controlled. Aarohi began missing classes more often, convincing herself she could catch up later. Her academic performance slowly declined, but she ignored the warning signs. The pressure to maintain appearances became stronger than her commitment to her studies. Isolation followed soon after. Aarohi stopped sharing her struggles with friends and avoided social gatherings unless they fit her new lifestyle. She feared that questions would expose her secret. Her phone became her most valuable possession, always close, always monitored. Notifications controlled her mood, determining whether her day felt safe or uncertain. Without realizing it, she had handed over emotional power to someone she barely knew. What disturbed her most was the growing sense of surveillance. The man seemed to know when she was late or when her routine changed. If she stayed out longer than expected or missed a scheduled moment, his attention intensified. At first, she saw this as concern. Slowly, it began to feel like control. The comfort that once protected her now tightened like a cage. Aarohi started noticing rules that were never spoken aloud. Certain friends were discouraged, certain areas were off-limits, and her independence was questioned indirectly. She found herself adjusting her behavior to avoid tension. Each compromise felt small, but together they reshaped her life. The luxury she enjoyed came with invisible conditions that she never fully agreed to, but somehow accepted. Despite the unease, Aarohi continued forward. Fear of losing financial security outweighed her instincts. She believed she could manage the situation if she stayed careful. She told herself she was strong and intelligent enough to exit whenever she chose. But deep inside, she sensed that the balance had already shifted. The city around her continued to move at its usual speed. unaware of the quiet struggle unfolding behind closed doors. Aarohi's life looked polished and successful from the outside, yet inside she felt increasingly trapped. The line between choice and obligation blurred, and the glamorous world she had stepped into began to reveal its darker foundation. What once felt like opportunity was slowly becoming a test of survival, one she did not yet know how to escape. Aarohi's discomfort grew slowly, almost invisibly, as if the weight of her situation increased a little each day. What once felt exciting now felt tense and unpredictable. She began waking up with anxiety, checking her phone before doing anything else. The messages that used to bring relief now brought pressure. Even when nothing was said directly, she sensed expectations hanging over her. The support that had once helped her survive was now shaping every decision she made. She started to notice patterns she had ignored before. The man always knew when her routine changed, even when she had not mentioned it. If she stayed longer on campus or visited a place outside her usual schedule, his attention sharpened. Aarohi wondered how he had access to such details, but she avoided asking questions. Fear told her that curiosity could make things worse. Instead, she adjusted her behavior to avoid conflict. The emotional tone of their connection shifted. The calm and understanding presence she trusted slowly turned demanding. Subtle reminders of financial help were woven into conversations, making her feel indebted. Aarohi realized that the money was no longer a gift, but a tool. Each payment felt like a silent contract she never signed, but was expected to honor. She felt trapped by gratitude and obligation. Her mental health suffered quietly. Aarohi lost focus in class and struggled to concentrate on assignments. She stopped answering calls from her family as often, afraid that her exhaustion and fear would be noticed. When she did speak to them, she forced positivity into her voice. She believed that telling the truth would only disappoint them and confirm her own failure. The distance between who she was and who she pretended to be grew wider. One evening, Aarohi considered ending everything. She imagined returning to her old life, accepting the struggle and rebuilding on her own. The thought brought relief for a moment, but then fear followed. She worried about the consequences, about what would happen if she walked away suddenly. The man knew too much about her life, her finances, and her vulnerabilities. That knowledge felt dangerous in the wrong hands. Bank records later revealed unusual activity during this period. Transfers came in larger amounts, but were followed by requests to move money elsewhere. Aarohi did not fully understand what she was being asked to do, but she complied out of fear and confusion. She told herself it was temporary and harmless. Investigators would later describe this stage as the moment when she crossed an invisible line. The pressure became constant. Aarohi felt watched even when she was alone. Her independence had faded, replaced by careful obedience. She no longer recognized herself as the confident student who had arrived in New York with hope. Instead, she felt like a shadow moving through a life that was no longer hers. By the time Aarohi realized she was in serious danger, the situation had already tightened around her. Escape no longer felt simple or safe. What had begun as a desperate attempt to survive had evolved into something far more threatening. The cracks beneath the luxury were now impossible to ignore, and the fear she carried inside warned her that her situation was moving toward a point from which there might be no return. The night Aarohi disappeared began like many others, quiet and ordinary on the surface. She followed her routine, careful not to attract attention, careful not to make mistakes. Yet something about that evening felt heavier than usual. Her movements were slower, her thoughts restless. She checked her phone repeatedly, as if waiting for a signal she could not explain. By the time she left her apartment, she had already erased several messages and cleared parts of her digital history, small actions that suggested fear rather than confidence. She was seen entering a high-end residential building far from her campus, a place she had visited before but never spoken about. Security cameras captured her walking in alone, carrying a small bag. There was no footage of her leaving. That detail would later become one of the most troubling aspects of the case. Inside the building, there were blind spots, areas with limited camera coverage, spaces designed for privacy rather than safety. When Aarohi failed to return that night, no one immediately panicked. Her roommates assumed she was staying elsewhere, something she had done before. Her phone remained off, which raised mild concern but not alarm. By the next morning, her absence felt unusual. Classes went unattended. Messages went unanswered. Still, the assumption was that she needed space or time away. Days passed, and the silence grew louder. Aarohi's university flagged her absence after repeated no-shows. Friends began searching her social media, noticing that nothing had been updated. The carefully maintained online presence had stopped completely. That sudden break felt unnatural, especially for someone who once posted daily. A missing person report was eventually filed, though crucial time had already been lost. Investigators retraced her final known movements. They found ride records, location data, and fragments of deleted messages. Her last known destination raised questions due to its connection to financial irregularities. Bank activity showed a transfer made just hours before she vanished, followed by no further transactions. Her account remained untouched, frozen in time. The apartment she had visited was searched, but nothing conclusive was found. The resident listed under the lease had already left the city. The identity connected to the address led to shell companies and false records. Each lead opened into another dead end. Aarohi's name appeared in financial documents that made no sense for a student. The more investigators looked, the more complicated her disappearance became. For her family back in India, the waiting was unbearable. They had received no warning, no signs of danger. The image they held of their daughter clashed painfully with the reality unfolding overseas. Every unanswered call deepened the fear that something irreversible had occurred. As weeks passed, hope faded. Aarohi's disappearance no longer felt like a choice or accident. The pattern suggested planning, precision, and intent. Someone had erased her presence carefully, leaving behind only fragments. What began as silence slowly transformed into dread. The city continued to move, unaware that a young life had slipped into darkness, leaving behind questions that would soon lead to a horrifying discovery. 2 weeks after Aarohi vanished, the case took a dark and irreversible turn. A routine inspection at an abandoned storage facility on the outskirts of the city led to a discovery that stunned investigators. Inside a locked unit, hidden behind layers of plastic and discarded furniture, human remains were found. Identification took time, but personal items confirmed what many feared. Aarohi Malhotra was gone. The news sent shockwaves through the student community and quickly drew national attention. The condition of the scene suggested careful planning rather than a spontaneous act. There were no signs of a struggle at the location, indicating that whatever had happened occurred elsewhere. Investigators believed the storage unit was chosen for isolation and anonymity. Surveillance in the area showed a rented vehicle entering late at night days earlier, but the license plate was obscured. The trail was cold almost immediately. Media coverage intensified as details emerged. A young international student, far from home, caught in a mysterious and violent end. Public sympathy poured in, but so did speculation. Authorities urged restraint, yet the story spread rapidly across news platforms. Aarohi's private life became public overnight, examined through fragments of data and partial truths. Investigation shifted focus to her digital and financial records. Experts analyzed her phone, laptop, and online accounts. Many messages had been deleted, but traces remained. Patterns of communication pointed to multiple anonymous accounts rather than a single individual. Financial analysts uncovered complex money movements passing through Aarohi's account. The amounts were too large and too frequent to be accidental. She appeared to be an unknowing link in a broader financial operation. Autopsy reports revealed details that deepened the tragedy. The findings confirmed that her death was not accidental. The timing suggested she was killed shortly after her disappearance. The method indicated restraint and control rather than chaos. Investigators believed she trusted the people involved, at least initially. That trust likely made her vulnerable. Authorities attempted to trace the online identity connected to her last known interactions. The account had been wiped clean. IP addresses led through multiple countries, routed through layers of encryption. Each step forward uncovered another barrier. It became clear that the person she believed she knew did not exist in any traditional sense. For Aarohi's family, the truth was devastating. They received her belongings through official channels, stripped of context and warmth. The dreams they had supported ended in silence and paperwork. They struggled to understand how their daughter's life had taken such a hidden turn without any warning signs. As investigators pieced together the evidence, a disturbing picture emerged. Aarohi's death was not an isolated act of violence, but part of something larger and more organized. Her story exposed a dangerous world operating beneath the surface of opportunity and success. The case remained open, filled with unanswered questions. While justice seemed distant, the impact of her story was immediate. A young life lost became a symbol of the risks faced by those navigating unfamiliar worlds alone, where trust can be manipulated and silence can be fatal. As the investigation deepened, authorities began to understand that the man Aarohi believed she knew was never a real individual. The identity she trusted was carefully constructed, layered with false names, fake images, and scripted behavior designed to build emotional dependence. What initially appeared to be a secret personal relationship slowly revealed itself as a calculated operation. The comforting presence, the financial support, and the controlled interactions all followed a pattern seen in organized digital exploitation cases. Cybercrime experts joined the investigation to analyze the online trail. They discovered that the account communicating with Aarohi was part of a rotating system. Multiple operators could access it, responding at different times but maintaining a consistent personality. This explained how the man always seemed available and aware. The illusion of a single caring benefactor was maintained through strict coordination and surveillance tools. Aarohi had unknowingly been interacting with a network rather than a person. Financial records exposed the true purpose behind the arrangement. Aarohi's bank account had been used to move money through various channels, masking the original source. Small deposits followed by rapid transfers matched known money laundering techniques. The network targeted young international students because they were financially vulnerable and unfamiliar with local laws. Aarohi fit the profile perfectly. Her need for help had made her valuable to them. When investigators reconstructed the timeline, they identified the moment Aarohi likely became a risk. Her hesitation, her attempts to pull away, and her questions about sudden financial requests signaled instability to the network. In operations built on secrecy, uncertainty is dangerous. Authorities believed that once she stopped being useful, she became a liability. That realization reframed her death not as a crime of passion, but as a deliberate act of erasure. Attempts to trace those responsible led across borders. Servers were located overseas, routed through countries with limited cooperation agreements. Fake companies dissolved overnight. Rental records pointed to false identities. Every element of the operation was designed to disappear quickly. By the time Aarohi's body was found, the network had already shifted focus to new targets. This revelation shocked the public. The idea that a young student could be manipulated so completely by an invisible system unsettled many. Aarohi had believed she was managing a risky but personal arrangement. In reality, she had been absorbed into a machine that valued her only as long as she served its purpose. Investigators faced growing frustration. Without a single identifiable suspect, accountability became nearly impossible. The case exposed major gaps in digital safety and international enforcement. Aarohi's name joined a growing list of victims whose stories remain unresolved due to the complexity of online crime. Her death changed how authorities viewed similar cases. What once looked like individual choices were now recognized as structured exploitation. Aarohi never truly knew who was controlling her life, her finances, or her fate. The man she trusted had never existed, but the consequences of that illusion were painfully real. The case officially slowed after months of investigation, but the impact of Aarohi's story did not fade. With no arrests and no public suspects, her death was labeled unresolved. For authorities, it became one of many complex international cases buried under legal barriers and digital anonymity. For her family, it remained an open wound. They returned to their daily lives, carrying unanswered questions, haunted by the thought that they never truly knew the dangers their daughter faced so far from home. Aarohi's belongings were returned in sealed boxes, each item stripped of the life it once held. Her phone, laptop, and personal notes were reduced to evidence rather than memories. The dreams she carried across the ocean ended in reports and files. Her parents struggled to accept how easily their daughter had slipped into a world built on deception. The guilt of not noticing signs weighed heavily on them, even though the truth was that Aarohi had hidden her fear to protect them. As details of the case spread, universities and student groups began discussing the risks faced by international students. Workshops were organized to address financial vulnerability, online manipulation, and hidden exploitation. Aarohi's story became a reference point, a warning that was shared quietly in classrooms and orientation sessions. Her name was no longer just part of a crime file, but a symbol of caution. The documentary coverage brought attention to a reality many preferred to ignore. The promise of easy money, mentorship, and luxury often mask systems designed to control and exploit. Aarohi's experience showed how isolation and desperation can push intelligent people into dangerous situations. She was not careless or reckless. She was young, alone, and under pressure. That truth made her story resonate deeply with viewers. Despite the lack of justice, her case forced important conversations. Law enforcement agencies began collaborating more closely on similar digital crimes. Financial institutions reviewed monitoring practices for student accounts. Small changes followed, though they came too late for Aarohi. Her life became a lesson paid for at the highest cost. In the end, Aarohi Malhotra was remembered not for the way she died, but for what her story revealed. She represented countless young people navigating unfamiliar worlds without guidance. Her silence, born from fear and shame, became the most tragic element of all. Had she spoken sooner, the outcome might have been different, but hindsight offers no comfort. Her story remains unfinished, suspended between what is known and what will never be uncovered. The absence of answers leaves room for reflection rather than closure. Aarohi's life serves as a reminder that danger does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, wrapped in support and kindness, waiting for trust to be given. As the documentary ends, viewers are left with an uncomfortable truth. Behind the glamour of opportunity and freedom, there exists a hidden world that preys on vulnerability. Aarohi's fate urges caution, awareness, and conversation. Her voice was silenced, but her story continues to speak, warning others to question, to seek help, and to never face fear alone.